Alhamdulillah. How are you?
Um, I'm good, alhamdulillah. Sister Zafara,
Zafira.
Zafir, huh?
Yes, that's correct.
Zafir. Assalamu alaikum. So just a little introduction about myself and the group, real quick. My name is Abu Bara Muhammad Amriki. I started this group um during the time or right after the George Floyd death. Um, as in the means or medium for coping with systemic racism that goes on in the community.
Mhm.
I felt a little bit obliged to do something because I worked maybe for 5 years as an imam in a local masjid here in New York. And I noticed working as the imam in the masjid that was in a predominantly black neighborhood, actually was in the ghetto, one of the ghettos in New York, that I noticed as being an imam, I can never help black peoples for some reason. Um, so when George Floyd death started, I see a lot of the Muslims, African American Muslims, not able to cope with some of these things or discussions because some of the Muslims are in denial about racism. So I started the group for a safe haven for African American Muslims to talk about our social issues on Facebook platform, right? Without any bias. Because sometimes you hear from Muslims bias, oh, that's black issues, that's racism or nationalism. So I start really dealing with a lot of those things. So I started the platform. Um, I want to introduce our guests and the members of the group and those individuals who follow me on Facebook. I want to introduce yourself to the group. And I see you on social media. I listen to a lot of your, a few of your videos and some of your podcasts. And I have did my little homework about you. Um, about your career, you as a therapist, a counselor. So I want to really introduce you to the group and give you the opportunity to introduce yourself. So can you please introduce yourself to our guests and members?
Okay, so obviously my government name is Michelle Renee Davis, and the reason why I wrote it up there is because that's how you'll find me anywhere because it's my legal name. But my attribute that I go by is Zafira. So basically, my journey as becoming a licensed professional counselor has been kind of an interesting one. Um, because I've been in the human service field for probably 15 plus years at this time. And I started out as being no, I started being Muslim. I took Shahada at 16.
2016. Hmm.
Oh, when I was 16 years old.
When you were 16 years old, okay.
Um,
Mashallah.
yeah, and I was Muslim for 10 years and then I stopped. I apostated for a little bit. I guess I knew everything and. However, I believe that there was a necessary journey that I had to go through um, to show me that I needed to depend on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and start following the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam because I had much more issues then than I have now, you know.
Hmm.
And I'm just grateful that he allowed me to come back to Islam and things like that. So I did take my master's degree at a Christian university, which is interesting because even though it was a Christian university, we didn't really talk about Christian dynamics. But however, being as though at that time I was Christian, so to speak, and going to church and going and looking at the Bible and stuff like that, it allowed me to see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's theme throughout Judaism, Christianity, Islam. And what I mean by that is that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never changed, and the things that, other people have distorted and said is just not accurate when you really crack open, religious textbooks.
Hmm.
Um, so I find my journey unique in that way from having different um, from being in different perspectives, from learning different perspectives, but also the application of the different perspectives. And seeing that as, our situation as African Americans is unique and it's nothing like any other group of people. No one in society where a large group of people were ripped from their homes, given new names, because you got to think about names are very, very powerful. That's why the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Give your children good names."
Mm.
So important. So we was ripped from our homes, given new names by our slave masters, and we were beat, sodomized, um, just whatever you can think of. It probably they did it, and we was shipped all over the world. And in America, where to me, our racism is very blatant, even though some people don't realize it, but our racism literally it's very insidious, and it impacts every part of your life, even to the way you view yourself, you view other people, your spouses, your children. That whole idea and concept, like boys don't cry. Like, where did you get that from? Who taught you that? Why is that a thing? You know, um, and we need to really start questioning why we believe the ideas that we believe about ourselves. And and I don't know if you heard me say when we was doing a podcast yesterday, when she was like, "Oh, I know I forgot exactly what she used," and I said, "But why can't you be passionate?" We quick to label ourselves with negative attributes as Black people when something could just be is a positive attribute. It's the way you use it, you
Like
know.
like black people using the N word for each other.
Yes. So like why do we have to, you know why can't it be something else? Like, at the end of it all, I understand that some people like, oh, we're trying to reclaim our heritage because it was a king or something where it was they took their name and distorted it. And I get that you want to reclaim heritage and take it back or anything like that, but we don't live there. And it's pointless to say you're reclaiming something here that's still derogatory.
Correct.
Because if you decided that you want to make your own community and then you want to reclaim the actual name of that person, then that's
Mm.
one. But to, just take off the R and put an A is not reclaiming something. It's just rebranding the abuse. And
Yeah, a lot of black people, you know, you know, I didn't even know how bad we are or our conditions are until I lived outside of the U.S. or I traveled to other countries, and seeing the impact of other people's societies, how they thrive, how they have love for their own culture, their peoples, and respect for each other. Right. I spent some time in Egypt. I spent some time in North Africa, studying Islam, and I spent some time, short time, I went to Indonesia. So there's a ethno culture where the people respect each other, they have a love for each other, and there's not a lot of self hate in these cultures, right? Related to the African American experience. Many years ago, I was in South Carolina. I was the imam there, and an old school brother told me that us black people in America, that we are made up, manufactured by white people, manufactured black peoples. The things, how we think, how we behave, how we act, we were made this way to by whites so we could do certain type of things or behave certain way, but it would benefit the power structure and would not benefit black people. So psychologically, yes, we have been affected as peoples. Even myself, I look deep down inside. Sometimes I think about why I say things or why I think certain way, and I try to analyze it. For example, our peoples in America, we have a lot of self-hate. I put a lot of our issues is connected to two things: self-hate and systemic racism. right? Self-hate and systemic racism. Systemic racism still affects black people today. Yesterday on the news, they had a talk about uh, reparations for some of the massacres in down south, right? And some of the victims who were victimized, this is 100 years ago, Tallahassee, 100 years ago, some of the victims still are alive. One of them said he still remembered today when his father took him, when white people was killing them, and put him in a wagon with his sister or his sibling, and they was running away. And the stigma that came after that. So 100 years living through that stigma, um, being abused, killed, and still being boycotted, and today fighting the government just to get reparation or to get to recognize what happened, that affects the mental health. Even when I heard that, hear him speaking about that, I'm furious inside. I have like anxiety, right? And this happened 100 years ago, and I still seeing this trauma. It is affecting me. I'm watching it, and I notice I ball the fists in my hand. I'm upset, and I'm like, why I'm balling my fist? Oh, this is part of PTSD, right? This is part of the trauma. I'm like, man, it still is affecting us as a peoples. Um, but I believe that because of Islam, we have a medium with the religion to empower ourselves, to uplift ourselves out of these situations and take a bad situation and make into a good situation where African Americans like ourselves who are Muslim can empower our people. Some is going to be through psychological help. That's very much needed. Others medium might be through activism. That's another medium. Another way it might be, me and you spoke, but some of our peoples, they're not trying to do anything. They're not trying to change. Well, we're gonna have to migrate away from these peoples just to build and community or build a safe haven for our peoples to help. Give me some of your background about what you specialize in, mashallah.
So my specialty is I do relational trauma. So basically, a lot of the clients that do come into my private practice, usually had childhood traumas and how it's impacting their relationships today. So we don't, I was doing a little psychoeducation for another group of sisters, and we talked about big T's and little T's. So that's big trauma and little traumas.
Mm,
The worst kind of trauma actually is the small T's, because the small T's happen over time, and it shapes us into a way that we don't even realize that it's happening because we get so used to the abuse that we, instead of recognizing that we're being abused, we internalize it, then we act it out. So trauma always comes as behaviors. They never show up as words because
mm,
you become traumatized. The part of your brain that gets impacted the most, I don't want to quote the actual name of it because I always forget, but it's basically the reptilian part of your brain that grows larger. So that's why when people have PTSD, they're more reactive. So like if something happens, they jump in, or if whatever's happening, it's behavioral, because that's how you learn to protect yourself. And one thing about your mind is it would do anything necessary to protect itself, even if that's going to be developing delusions. Whether that's, I've read cases where one case, this lady, she witnessed something that was very horrific and she went blind because of it. She had no medical reason why she should have gone blind, but she went blind. And your mind, like, that's just how your mind works. So you have to start questioning yourself, like, why do I like, we need to just get rid of that whole, oh, it's just, that's just how I am. Why? Why are you like that? Really think about that. Why do you think the way that you think? Why does that make sense to you? That's very, I question my own thoughts all of the time, all of the time, because you have to understand that your perception about reality is influenced by your past.
mm,
So it mean? That means if I was out in the jungle and a snake bit me, like I heard and then a snake bit me. And then if I go back out in the jungle again and I start hearing, I'm going to assume because of past experience that it might be a snake. But
mm,
then it comes out that, and I'm just, don't quote me for this, but it might be a cricket. I'm just saying. And then you're like, wait, it's something different. So that's what I mean by you have to always question why you think that way, what's happening. And that's why I said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that he judged based off intentions. Because I and someone else can do exactly the same thing. And
mm,
because perception, it means something totally different. Based off my intentions, it may be something totally different.
mm,
So, and the one that I like to use all the time is that, you know, people always say manipulation is a bad thing. They're like, yeah, manipulation is so bad. You shouldn't do that to people, blah, blah, blah. But if I give you a piece of Play-Doh and say, what should you do with this? And you're like, well, I can manipulate it. Is it bad? It's
mm,
how we use it, how we perceive it is what makes it bad. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says things are based off intentions. Because at the core of my job is really manipulation. That's really what I'm doing. I'm manipulating your thought process to help you change them. But it's not a bad thing. I'm trying to have you see something different, something positive in life so that you can move forward and reframing the things that you think about yourself and others. So like, the whole stereotype of like angry black woman and angry black man. I
mm.
Every time I hear somebody say it, I'm like, no, you're just passionate. You're passionate
Yeah,
because
but that stereotype really comes from white people's. If
but
you
we
look,
but we reiterate it and
mm,
we keep it because women in the black community, we got this whole thing of, oh, she aggressive. That stems from saying of an angry black woman. I'm not
mm,
a I'm assertive, but
mm,
also too, I need to be this way to function in this environment. And honestly, as black men, you need us to function this way in order for the family to progress. Because at the end of it all, the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam says, women are supposed to guard, their husband's property, right? While he's gone and he's away, not letting people in. Now, as a woman, as a black woman, I'm more likely to get victimized in our community. That's just the reality of it. I'm more likely to get victimized by anybody. So I can't be a damsel in distress in my community.
mm. But
That will put an easy
the
target.
real question is why she's in that predicament. That's another issue itself.
Yeah.
How
So
she's predicament.
it's like things when racism, like when you go down to the bare bones of stuff,
Mm,
the problems are compounded on each other.
that's right.
And and for our community to heal, it literally will have to go through this huge transformation, like a huge transformation, because everything that you think about ourselves it has layers and layers and layers on stuff. Just like when I was saying, like with me being aggressive as an African American woman, but knowing that I'm more likely to be victimized because I'm an African American woman, or because I'm not valued in our community. Like it's just layers and layers, and you just keep peeling it off and peeling it off. And unfortunately, it's gonna be peeling it off like an onion, and you're gonna cry through the whole problem. You're gonna cry through the whole.
I believe that in the black community today, I think the black woman is probably more protected than the black man. I mean, in some sense, she might not be protected if you look at these race soldiers, police, when it comes to police brutality or government. Like for example, one of the big discussions or very popular online is Kevin Samuels, right?
Mhm.
And Kevin Samuels, he focused a lot on the black woman, which contribute to a lot of the problems in the community. I think that the black woman, she's part of the problem as the black man is part of the problem. But some people would say that the black woman's not victimized because she's in a better predicament than the black man in this society. Well, that has been put there by the government because the black woman is she's not threatening compared to the black man. If you look at the activism or black movements, it's always been by black men and the women supported, but it always been men. So she's not as a bigger threat, but she does become victim of racism and things like this, right? She is also affected by it. But I think that when it comes to the black community as a whole, related to black women, like some brothers, some sisters feel on Facebook to said, "Oh, why are always talking about black women?" And I give them the answer. I said, Islamically, there's an ayat in Quran. Allah says, "La yaskara qawman min qawm, asa an yakunu khayru minhum." And do not also after that, do not mock each other, right? I don't want to quote the ayat wrong in Arabic, right? This is the translation. Women do not mock each other. Some scholars would say in the commentary of this is that Allah mentioned first the women after that. Do not mock each other, and women do not mock each other, and men do not mock each other. Women are mentioned first because women are most likely to fall into this predicament practice, right? And then some scholars continue to say is women, if they are righteous, if the woman is righteous, then her children would be righteous, and so would be society. And if the woman is wicked, so would be her children, and so would be her society. So woman is at the core of fixing problems in society. If the women are upright, the men would be upright, right? I do think for some of my critics, some sisters don't like what I say about black women, but the truth is, some of the problems you have in society in the black community, if the women were, I think if the black women and black men, we could get on the same page related to our issues, like we're talking about trauma, how it affects us as a peoples, and we come on the same page and we don't be at each other, because working in a multicultural community and living in the Muslim world, I have learned a few things. For example, you had a podcast yesterday, and I was talking about how the fathers need to be in the home, and if the father's not in the home, how it affects the child upbringing, especially male children. I understand that perfectly. I grew up in a single female household. I didn't have no father in the house, and I ended up in prison at a young age, and I didn't need to run the streets. I had money, right?
Mhm.
So I can understand that's very true. When I look deeper now, if we're able to talk about our issues as a peoples, man and women, and fix some of our issues, then we will be able to solve a lot of our problems together. No one else is going to fix our problem. The white man is not going to fix it. The government's not going to fix it. But I wanted to say that when I go working in a multicultural community, I'm sorry, I forgot that point. I worked in an area in Far Rockaway, Queens, in the masjid a couple of years ago. And majority is immigrant Muslims, and they're immigrant Muslims who live in the projects. They're immigrant Muslims who get Section A. They're immigrant Muslims who on welfare, and they have father and mother in the household, and they use it as a stepping stone. I don't see them fighting and bickering each other. That's the thing. I never see them. They have small little issues, but it doesn't come to the point where the man is outside the house. When that comes to that point, people in their community step in and fix these issues, right? In the black community, from another area, if you were to say, someone would say that the black man, the problem is finances or this or that. And the finance problems or whatever, that's related to systemic racism, right? We have to be very clear. Systemic racism is not going to promote black men because black men are a threat. If we look at the civil rights movement, if we look at the Black Panther Party, you think that the government had COINTELPRO. They figure out black men, it was organized because they had inside of the community, they have ways of income, ways of money, providing for themselves. Once they figure all these things out through COINTELPRO and they destroy these movements, then you start noticing in the 90s, black men outside of the home, black men not having the type of income due to systemic racism, due to redlining, due to any other factual welfare system, right? But we still will blame each other for this.
So let me
The
ask
black
you
mm,
that black men, you feel like they are more unprotected than a women, right?
for sure. Oh man, I've been in prison. I spent 20 from 20 years old to 24 in prison. Oh, trust me, man.
I have to disagree with you, right? But this is why.
Mm,
Now
and it's,
the feminist party and whatever, and black women rile around it and stuff like that. If a white woman get raped, it's all plastered on the news how she got raped and the person going to jail. Now we know that black women get raped too.
that's right. It's true.
When have you ever seen it plastered on the news when someone's violated a black woman? One,
Never.
one day I accidentally landed on a page where it was active. This cop was going to jail for raping like 20 black women in a poor neighborhood and no one knew about it.
I remember this.
And I was like, why is this not on the news? Like, why? But I'm quite sure if that was white society, it would have been every when it comes to treatment, because I work in drug and alcohol also,
Mm,
black women are less likely to get treatment. The reason
that's
why, because if she knows if she comes and get treatment, she's more likely going to get her kids taken away. She's more likely to lose her job. She's more like a lot of things happen. But see, what happens with black women is it's quiet kept. We suffer in silence. Y'all get plastered on the news. Do you know the number one thing that kills women for black women?
stress.
Hospitals. I'm more likely to die in a hospital than my counterparts. One time they did a study where they had a white man, a black man, a white woman, and a black woman all go into the hospital for the same symptoms. It was the same hospital. And they literally treated the white man the best. Then it came to the white woman, then the black man, and then the black woman. We're more likely to die in childbirth. We're more likely to not get just basically healthcare in general is like police are to black men.
But do you think, because I don't have a real background in I mean in the healthcare, but I noticed for a long time ago, I'm divorced now, right? I've been married to somebody for like 11 years. My ex-wife is from overseas, right? So when we had a few of our children, and I went to the hospital where the child is born, I remember one day when I think my second son when he was born, he was in the hospital, and the nurses was like, the black lady, it's like she's the only one to have no husband or no man there with her, right? Then I start noticing that, like when I go to the hospital, sometimes the women, there's no couple. There's not a couple. There's not a whole bunch of family members to ask following up questions to make sure she's getting her care. Sometimes the women be alone. Sometimes the men be alone too. The black men, they be alone. You know, but we understand the racism of the health field, and because my father died when I was young, and same thing, medical, was in the hospital, had a good job, insurance, his insurance expired while he was in the hospital, and they let him there and let him die, right? And he had a good job, he was a supervisor. So we know that the hospitals, they definitely don't care for the black man or black woman. But I think that we need to have discussion, because we have there's a lot of heat, and there's a lot of fire between the black man and black woman. There's a lot of fire between us. There's a lot of fighting where we don't want to deal with each other no more. Like, I'm married. I mean, I've been married for 11 years, but prior to my ex-wife Marion, I haven't been married to a black sister for many years because it just don't work out. At my lowest, it don't work out. My highest, it don't work out. Right. And a lot of black men have turned around and they're not no longer marrying black women. And Africa, I'm talking about African American women. They might marry black African or Arab or Asian, but I know I have a whole community of friends who are black Americans. They're not married to any black American women. And we sit down and we talk. It's like it's too much heat, it's too much hatred, it's too much animosity. No one wants to listen. And then being an imam and going through doing counseling and talking to people about marital problems and comparing the black African American to the immigrant Muslim. When the immigrant Muslim woman come to me to sit down, she's trying to get me to fix her marital problems. When the African American sister come and sit down, she's trying to get a divorce from her husband. She wants out. The immigrant woman, whether she's African, whether she's Asian, whether she's white, she's trying to look for somebody to fix it. In some cases, the immigrant woman, the husband is a bum, fornicating, drinking, on drugs, and the woman wants to work out the marriage. The African American, oh, my husband, he did overtime at work. I think he got another wife on the side of one of divorce. Think, no proof. And this is real scenario. Oh, my husband, he was late from his job. I wanted to like, he must have another wife somewhere. I'm like, so, we have a lot of heat, we have a lot of hatred. I know brothers who are pro-black, 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 into activism. Pro-black got a white wife. Pro-black got an Asian wife. Right? Then one day I was listening to a black psychologist, and he said something that hit me. He said, I was listening to Dr. Amos Wilson, and he said, how are you going to be fix the black community and you're not going to be investing to the black woman? That kind of hit me real hard, right? Because that's the truth. It's the real truth. So we need to, I think the female, the black female and the black male, we need to find some type of platform or to a certain level where we need to really fix ourselves. I have a friend of mine's new Shahada, Muslim for 3 years. And the first thing he's telling me, he wants to marry an immigrant Muslim. And then he married one, it didn't work out. I said, see, he said he still don't want to marry a black African American sister. And I asked him why. He's from the hood. I said, why? He said, because his mother treated him. He's serious.
But no, that's true. But that's just trauma. And a lot we just a walking ball of trauma, walking around in these streets. And my thing is, when it comes to like polygyny and all that other kind of stuff, how can I be okay with you getting another wife when you can't even hold down the fort that you already have? Brothers who has 4 wives and don't pay not a doggone bill. Actually be and and then the turnover of this wife, that wife, it's like at one point in time you have to say, is black women a problem or is it you? Because we love to say that, but I know brothers who marriage pile is like 20, 30 women. Like, how do you have that many? But then gonna say, oh, women are ungrateful.
But that's like Philly thing. It's like Philly though. You from Pennsylvania, right?
Women
I'm from New York. I'm from New York, and New York, is you don't find a lot of brothers who got 2 or 3 wives from black community. You find like a few brothers who got 2 or 3 wives, and those black brothers got good jobs, right? Because that's really related to Philadelphia.
Yeah, and
Philly's a totally different ball game for East Coast. Philly. Listen, I've been overseas. I've been in Muslim countries, and people know about Philadelphia and what goes on in Philly for the Muslims. I'm letting you know that right now. I've been to Egypt, been to Morocco, I've been to Indonesia. People know what's going on with Philadelphia and the Muslims. Trust me, because people from Philly, they travel to a lot of countries too. As for Philadelphia, the brothers having all these wives, because Philadelphia has a totally different scenario, different situation than any other place. Right? And then
I don't know what
a lot of Muslims in Philly too, on top of that, especially African American. African American in Philadelphia is like what, 70%? Right? Yes, you have majority of the population in Philadelphia, correct?
No. We're not even half. But it's still
sure? In Philadelphia?
Yeah.
At least close to, I think 70% African American Philadelphia.
Well, we have millions here, but it's not that large of a percentage when it comes to like the ratio from non-Muslims to, non-believers. But
Philly, Muslims in Philly is special. It's a special group. I tell you right now. Yes, I have a lot of friends. My friends that have 2 wives. The guy, he has a good job. He's working.
I agree.
Been down south. Some sisters like, yo, I want a second wife. The woman would say no, or the brother like, nah, I don't want the headache. I think Philly's got a special scenario. Philly is a special situation in Philadelphia. I like polygyny. I like to have 2, 3 wives, 4 wives. But I know in the reality, I can't afford them, and then what type of headache is going to come. Philadelphia is a different situation due to maybe some of the social programs that they have for people, so peoples are involved into these things, right? Philly has, Philly, brothers in Philly is special group of brothers and sisters in Philadelphia. That's all I can say.
But yeah, we definitely have a whole nother issue. But I think because in Philly, being as though we so used to trauma and stuff like that, that we find it to be okay that we discard each other like that. You know,
Philly's a big no-no. You know that, right? You ask any Muslim outside of Philly, you want to get married to somebody from Philadelphia? It's a big no-no. I lived in Canada for 2 years. I had a friend, Palestinian, told me he wanted to get married. He asked me to help. He said, "But whatever you do, no one from Philadelphia." I was like, "How you know about Philly? You live in you a Canadian, you West Coast Canada." It was in Vancouver, Canada. This guy is Arab. He said, "I want you to hook me up with some Salafi sister from the West, but not from Philadelphia." I
and
mean, yeah, Philly is a special problem.
no, but don't get me wrong, because I'm a stream advocate for our women and our men. Like I don't want you to like for both of us, because here in Philadelphia we are really sick.
Mm,
I mean emotionally and mentally we are sick,
mm,
and and obviously the cure is the Quran and Sunnah. But and it's sad because, and the reason why I say that it's sad is because even with my last marriage that I had,
mm,
I never forget what my ex-husband said, like,
mm,
I never thought it would be somebody like you. And for the life of me, that until I became a therapist and started interacting with more people, I was like, oh, this is a lot. Because, birds of a feather usually flock together. So a lot of my other friends have degrees,
mm,
teachers, other therapists and people trying to own businesses and stuff. So, like, a lot of the women that I have in my circle is
mm,
like women who are amazing women. But when I
mm,
start getting into being a therapist and start seeing people, it it breaks my heart. Like some people, when they've come to me, it took everything in my being not to cry
mm,
for what they were experiencing, and not understanding why their thought process was off. And I'm gonna give you an example. This was way back when I was in internship though, and
mm.
a lady came and she said, I'll never forget one time my mom put me in a corner for 3 days and I had to pee and poop in that corner.
Wow, Steve. Yeah, I never seen no stuff like that.
Yeah, the stuff that people tell me is unbelievable. And that's why it's so important to give people grace. The thing about it is that if y'all don't take nothing from me, is
Mm,
that when you see people behaving weirdly, and what I mean by weirdly, like just counterproductive, like just like, why are you acting like that? Behind it is usually always trauma.
mm,
'Cause people be like, as a man, why you can't never make no decisions? Because the
mm,
whole time he was growing up, he was gaslighted to make him seem like everything was always his fault. He always do everything wrong. So now he's an adult and he's like, I don't want to do anything because I'm going to be wrong and I'm gonna do something wrong. And one thing I can say is gaslighting is the worst. Gaslighting and inconsistency is the two worst abuse that you can do to children. They are the two words. It's better that a parent, and I say parent because it could be father or mother, to be absent than to be inconsistent. People will be like, oh, any way he can be in a, or any way she can. No, I am telling you, it is better to allow them to be absent than to be inconsistent. Because what inconsistency does, it makes people fight for the relationship. So the child will be fighting for the father's relationship, fighting for the mother's relationship. So then when they get older and someone is abusing them, they keep fighting for it. And all it's doing is breaking them more.
You
And then
know, domestic violence, it has a very big impact on children, and abusive parents, whether it's verbally or physically. Even just watching parents fight and arguing, not even fighting, but just arguing, it definitely impairs the child and it definitely gives them like low self-esteem. I think a lot of our peoples don't know this also. Like for example, we talk about psychology and going for therapy in the black community, it's like a bad stigma with it, but
mhm,
in the wider community it's accepted, for example, right? So the white person would say to me, for example, like I went long time ago, I went to a nutritionist, Jewish lady, and
mhm,
she's like, I explained to her how I have this Egyptian woman I'm married, she drives me crazy, right? And she was like, where you grew up at? I told her what part of New York I'm from, where I went to school. She said, oh, you went to school with these white people. This is an all white neighborhood. She was like, I don't see why you in your predicament like this. You had a good education, right? Um, why you with somebody who was aggressive like this? So a white person will understand that this type of behavior is not good for the person, mental health, or the children, for example. In the black community, we would say this is normal behavior. And if I mention psychotherapy or use psychotherapy, I use some psychotherapy with my companions and associates, they would say, "Oh, you are you playing with my head or something like this," right? They would say psychology is that's for white people's, it's not for black people's, and they continue to go through the trauma. Can you talk a little bit about coping skills for
Coping skills.
trauma? Mm,
So, coping skills are temporary. I
mm,
tell you that all the time because people think like, oh, I can just do this breathing exercise. Is going to help me calm down. It'll help you calm down. It'll help you calm down. But this is the thing about coping
mm,
skills. The behaviors that you're doing was once coping skills.
mm,
Because
yeah,
so, like for example, if I was a person who, when my parents start arguing, I go in my room and lock the door because I want to avoid it. That's a coping strategy. But then
mm,
what happens is you get older, you and your spouse have a conflict, and then you go in your room and you lock the door and never deal with it.
mm,
So everything that we do to employ stuff are usually a variation of a coping strategy that we use, whether it's negative or positive.
mm,
The real thing is coping strategies will work for a little while,
mm,
but then you have to dig deep and you have to figure out what's the thought process behind stuff. So I like to always use myself as an example. I had like growing up, my dad used to always call me stupid. I was a stupid girl. Like every single day I was stupid.
mm,
So now that I'm older, and say somebody don't have to actually say, Zah, you stupid. They don't have to do that. Say if they do something to me and I feel like they thought I was stupid, that's why they did it. See, mind you, because it's my perception. You
mm,
know, listen, I always tell people it's always about you. So in my head, I'm like, they must think I'm stupid. So what
mm,
happens is then because I felt like I couldn't protect myself as a child, now I can
mm,
protect myself as an adult because I'm grown. So then I overcompensate
mm.
for the perceived violation.
A lot of people have that. A lot of people are like that.
Yeah.
Trust me, I know somebody right now. When you're saying that somebody, a family member, think they say,
But
"Oh, you think I'm stupid?" Yeah, I
yeah,
see. I see. I understand now.
but,
Now I understand. Mm,
but what I'm trying to say is I could
mm,
employ a coping strategy. Hey,
mm,
whenever I'm triggered, I can walk away. Hey, whenever this, I can do that. Those things is great. But then there's one, the thing about coping strategies is they're great until they no longer work
perfect. Gotcha.
because eventually it runs out.
Mm.
And
What's
then
the solution, or what's the
just
there?
so you have to start getting down to the why,
Mm,
because then when you get down to the why, because you know without me knowing the why, I'm like, oh, you think I'm stupid, I'm about to do X, Y, and Z, whatever it is that I decide to do, that whatever people do. But when I start finding out, when I start realizing, like, okay, I feel like this, I'm triggered really badly because growing up, someone always called me stupid. So now when I'm interacting with someone, I'm like, they're not calling me stupid. They're in their own pain. They have their own whatever is going on. And so when you start to change your thought process, eventually you stop thinking like that. When people do stuff, you be like, oh, look at that. That's crazy. Because
mm,
you change your thought process. But
mm.
adding a coping strategy, it only works but for so long. You have to do cognitive restructuring. It is a must. It is imperative that you start doing those things because if not, a coping strategy is going to fail you eventually, just like the coping strategy is failing you now that's and is no longer working.
So can you explain a little bit more about the cognitive restructuring of the behavior, changing the behavior?
Well, cognitive restructuring, it starts before the change of the behavior. The behavior by
mm,
itself is just a coping strategy.
mm,
So we have like different things where it says cognitive therapy and then you have cognitive behavioral therapy. So with coping strategies, that's just behavioral therapies. You're doing one thing and you were doing one thing and you're replacing it with another behavior. So like when the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, follow up a good deed after a bad deed. That is
mm,
behavioral modification. That's you replacing a behavior. So that's coping strategies because eventually it starts to become your norm if you keep doing it. However, if you don't address the cognitive part, eventually it's going to fail you because it's always that shaitan that knows you to say, I know you've been doing good, but they really are playing in your face and think you stupid, and it's just like that whole, and you always revert to something that you were used to doing in the past. So like people who like have addictions, and I like addictions best because it's kind of obvious
mm,
rather than other behavioral stuff. I always tell people that you should find out what people's struggle points were, because
mm,
if things fail, their coping strategies that they used in the past may resurface. So if you had someone who maybe was violent, but they went to rehabilitation, they went to therapy, blah 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 blah, you got to keep in mind that, hey, this person was violent. That was their coping strategies. If the coping strategies that they employed now fails, they're going to resort back to violence. They're going to
mm,
resort back to drug use. They're going to resort back to um, avoiding situations. They're going to revert back. So you always have to keep that in mind. And that's why I think another reason why people marriages be failing, because they see somebody and say, oh my god, he's cute, he has a nice beard, she's dressed cute, she's sexy, oh look, she's small tiny, she let me marry her, and not knowing what they come in with.
mm. Yeah,
You-
that
and
mental health breakdown is very important as a person you want to marry.
and I think
Trust.
that it's so important that like we really, and again, Islam is the solution, because that's why it was important that adults, when I say adults, I mean our parents, were
Mm,
involved in our marriages when we were picking uh, spouse, because they understand that point, because they are married. They understand that if their father is like that, they're more likely their son is like that, or their mother is like that, they're more likely, and it passes
I-
down. Understand,
but
and they
far
understand
from
you, and they be like,
that.
I know this is gonna work for you, because this is the behaviors that person have, and they understand it. You don't get that in your 20s. I'm just starting to understand that now, and I'm a whole therapist with 15 plus years in the field, and I'm still starting to understand how relational trauma, how your formative years really influence your behavior, isn't it? There's still stuff that I'm uncovering as I get older, even about myself. And I'll be like, dang, I can't believe. Um, I don't know if like I'm writing a memoir,
Mm,
and I had typed something out, and I looked at the sentence and I said, even as I'm writing this is a dysfunctional statement.
mm,
Remember what it was, but I just remember saying it in the book because I wanted people to understand that when you become traumatized, it really influences your whole being, every single thing,
mm,
everything. It could even influence so much so of colors you don't like. I remember I was reading something where the lady, she had got raped by this guy, but she never saw his face, but she remember him having a red cat. And she said, in every sentence, she hated red. But imagine if you was a child and that happened, and then you can't understand why every time you see red, you just irritated and irritable.
mm,
And then you got your husband, he walking around the house with a red t-shirt, and then you snapping, you like, what the hell did I do? But you don't even understand. That's
That's
important, to give each other's grace, because you really don't know demons that people may be battling, because sometimes they don't even know what demons they battling themselves. I've had many people where they didn't even realize that their parents was abusive. I was doing a session with a girl, and she was saying how her dad used to always say, you don't love me. And I was like, that's abusive to say that to a child. Like what? But her and him and the mom was like, would say crazy things. So I was like, do you think that's abuse? And she was like, you know what? It is. And she's in her 30s, just realizing that all her life she was emotionally and mentally abused. And we think that we know stuff, but we don't know. And so you look at behaviors and you ask yourself, one, why am I doing it? Or why do you think that they doing it?
Mm,
What happened to you? Like my professor used to say that all the time. He said, I stopped asking people. Well, he did say why. He did say he stopped asking people why they do stuff. But he was like, what happened to you? Because when you find out what happened to people, it gives you more empathy and grace. Like
mm,
that. That's a shame. Because I always because I'm very open about my story. And, like when I was a kid, like I was sexually abused. And when I got married, and my husband leaned in to kiss me. I was like, and he was like, why you like that? And I'm like, I don't know. Like it didn't even dawn on me. And then when I was sitting there thinking, I was like, you know what? I've never kissed anyone ever.
mm,
Because my experience of intimacy, my first experiences of intimacy, which was a violation, it didn't have that aspect to it.
mm.
That's how I learned about intimacy. It's dysfunctional. So now, what do I do? Whatever that may be. But you just, it's so intricate. It's so intricate. And that's why I always tell people,
Sometimes the women be the opposite. Sometimes also very sexualized.
yeah,
Have any, partners or things like that, or over sexualized.
yeah.
Uh,
It was sex.
so how long you been in your practice?
Oh, so my private practice, I just started it in January.
Mm,
I've been a therapist since 2018.
mashallah.
Mashallah.
What license and sort of certifications that you have with your profession?
So I'm a licensed professional counselor and I'm a national certified counselor. I'm actually in the process of getting licensed in Wisconsin. I'm going through the licensing process over there.
Mm,
I need to do because I have some clients in Wisconsin, then I got to get licensed in some other states where people have been reaching out to me to have sessions, other Muslims having sessions virtually. And as long as I can accommodate people, that's what I'm trying to do, inshallah. But
how
yeah.
much do you charge?
So my fee is 120 per session. However, I do have a sliding scale where people have to just show me their pay stubs and stuff like that. And I put it into like this calculator that does it based off of income. But usually I still charge less than the income that they say because to me it's grossly inaccurate because you know how Americans is, we greedy as crap.
Yeah.
Um,
Mm,
but I work two jobs in order to have my costs stay low for people.
mm.
So, because my people need it. And if I really like try to make this practice go like live with just that, I will
Mm.
bankrupt because I don't charge people enough.
So describe your ideal patient.
My ideal patients,
Mm,
I take general mental health issues. I do not take like severe mental health problems. So what that would look like, it doesn't mean, what I mean by severe, I'm not talking about because if you have schizophrenia or bipolar, anything like that, if you have those and it's managed by medications, I accept.
mm,
It's the ones that I can't do partial hospitalization. I don't do partials. I don't do IOP.
mm,
Um, and I don't even really do outpatient. So outpatient is like groups like that's ongoing like 2 to 3 times a week. I mostly do individuals. I do want to start a group one day for women um that hopefully once I get around to it, like start really formulating a group because that helps with keeping costs low so that people can get services. And I find that groups actually work better than individuals when people's mental health is not really severe, um,
Mm.
and they
Like
just
mild, they have mild psychosis.
yeah, because what happens is they support each other within the group, and and the best part about that is that the that's why Jama is so important because it makes people feel better, accepted, loved, valued, um, and people can get through struggles and tribulations together. But if it's a little bit more severe, individuals are better
Mm.
because I can't account for if someone says something that may not really be okay, because sometimes you got to check people, like, like, because they'll say some crazy things and it may not even be crazy to regular people, but it'd be crazy stuff. Like, when I had an IOP group, one of the guys was like, he was like, I don't know why I was about to imitate his voice, but he's like, as long as I did heroin, I never shot it. So I'm like injected. So I looked at him and I said, and you still lost your house.
Yeah, man,
He was
that's a
like,
whole
like
addictions. Oh man,
he was,
addictions are
oh,
bad. Yeah.
he was like, oh yeah. I was like, but see, if somebody has severe mental health issues, they may not come back because they like,
Mm.
oh, I'm being judged, blah 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 blah, but not understanding that people want to feel better, and what we have taught society is that what society has taught us that you have to step on other people to feel better.
Mm.
So sometimes they say things that's just not acceptable to say to each other, and then I got to use my aggression to be like, no, we're not doing it here. This is love.
How so? How would a person contact you for these services?
So the best way is if you go on Psychology Today, and you
Mm.
just type in my name, Michelle Renee Davis. I'm
I will add it to the. I have the link. I will add it to the video. Actually,
it, it,
I'm looking at your profile. Mm.
it actually has my phone number. It links you to my website, and it's easier to find than anything. And even if you actually type in Michelle Renee Davis in a search engine as a therapist, for Psychology Today, like most of the
It
therapists,
pops up.
I'm
It will
actually the
pop up.
person that comes
Yeah,
up.
yeah. I
Yeah.
seen it. That's how I found you. Your
Mhm.
information. All right. So for closing out, I have one question for the closing. My closing question, and it's what is your general approach? What type of psychotherapy that you use?
So my general approach in general, I use mostly CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. I look at your behaviors, I look at your cognitions, and we try to shape them into whatever it is that you want to be. I may use some solution focus, which is, this is the problem. Let's figure
Mm.
out a solution. And depending on how much denial you are in, then I'll just use motivational interviewing techniques where I'm just trying to motivate you to see a need to change whatever it is that to get to the desire things that you want. And that's usually people that be delusional because it's always everybody else, you know,
Mm.
not them, but yet they are the ones in the individual session.
So how would a session go with you? How would a person prepare with a session with you?
You don't have to prepare anything. I tell people like when you come, because sometimes people feel like they gotta have the best stories to come to therapy with. You don't because I tell people you bring you to any situation.
Mm.
Your thought process and your cognitions are going to be present regardless of if you're just talking about the way you interacted with your children. It's
Mm.
going to show up. So as you're talking, and just to give you an example, I had a lady come in. She was like, oh my goodness. She was like, my daughter, she called me a bad mom. And she's just like going crazy. She like hit with all the text messages. So I read them. Her daughter ain't say that not one time. Not once. So I said, can you show me where she called you a bad mom? And I sent it back. And she was like, I'm like, I don't see it. And she was like, oh, yeah, she never said it. I said, so if she never said that, then do you think that is maybe you feel that way?
Mm.
And she just was like, yeah, I feel like I've been a horrible mom. And we started talking about why she feel like a horrible mom.
Mm.
So
Mm.
and mind you, she talked about her daughter all the time about how her daughter thinks she a bad mom, blah 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 blah. But eventually, it always just comes out. Even though I already suspected that she believed that she was a bad mom, but that's neither here nor there.
All right, so maybe we can meet up again. We definitely had an hour worth of content for those who are watching and those who want to know a little bit more about you. I think this is a great introduction video for you in the group, African American Muslims opinions. Hope to maybe we get to do another interview again in the future, inshallah. And do you, as leaving or closing, do you have any questions for me?
No, because I've ran through your stuff too. I'm like, oh, let me.
Alhamdulillah.
Uh, Alhamdulillah. I think what you're doing is, great and amazing because it's all people like you are needed in our community who will speak up, and say what they see is, problematic and not try to sweep it under the rug like, black people are famous for doing, oh, it's okay, we just sweep it under the rug. And we just
Yeah, trust me, a lot of people be mad with some brothers I know. They don't like this content dealing with African American Muslim issues. It's a stigma. I don't know why. I know why it's a stigma, but I think in the African American Muslim community, when you talk about the social problems, whether it's mental health, whether it's finances, family, people think you're in reference to the Nation of Islam or you're similar to the Nation of Islam. And I tell them that no, man, this is part of Islam because the Prophet ﷺ dealt with our people's social issues. If we look into the Sunnah, the Prophet or his Sirah, the Arabs before the Prophet got Nabuwah, they was known for burying their daughters alive. Islam came and dealt with that. The Arabs were they were conquered over by other peoples, and Islam came and gave them, empowered them. So Islam really deal with a lot of issues. But I'm gonna close out this video, and for any guests, then I will put in the video details how to contact you, and that's it for tonight. Assalamu alaikum, sister.
wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.